This is part 3 of Master Manipulator, the explosive true story of fraud, embezzlement, and government betrayal at the CDC. Master Manipulator exposes the CDC's hidden agenda for the cover-up. Influenced by big pharma money, future high-paying jobs, and political lobbyists, CDC executives chartered a course different than what the findings of earlier vaccine safety studies revealed. The CDC needed an outsider to flatten the results of the data. Control the message. It's all about positioning the message. By any standard, the Brighton collaboration has failed its mission, and that became more evident in the conclusion of their paper, which reads, "Diversity in safety methods leads to considerable loss of scientific information." What does that gobbledygook mean? Were these vaccine scientists turned into astrophysicists referring to an event horizon on the rim of a black hole, when all forms of matter, atoms and molecules spaghettified in a singularity? Has a line ever been more broad, vague, and designed to blame vaccine safety all at the same time? First, the Danish team began to finalize the paper, a population-based study of measles, mumps and rubella vaccination and autism, and submitted to the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine to provide strong evidence that MMR vaccine doesn't cause autism. Look at his eye contact. Normal child. Luke was born well connected. You see that in the picture. Hitting all of his developmental milestones and appropriately communicated by the age of 1. August 5th, 2005, Luke was injected with 9 vaccines during one well visit. Tripidias, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, Haemophilus influenza type B, measles, mumps, rubella, varicella, and pneumococcal PCV7. I mean, that's insane! 9 vaccines! Luke ran a fever, raised migrating rash, and soon after became hypothermic and lethargic. He did not speak again for 3 years. He is now classified as autistic. Bob writes, NAAR Autism Speaks awarded $80,300 to Poul Thorsen at Aarhus University. I think that's why so many autistics are so opposed of Autism Speaks. Autism Speaks was founded in 2005 by Bob and Suzanne Wright after their grandson was diagnosed with autism. Since its conception, it has been the leading organization for autism research and awareness. Unfortunately, the autistic community and supporters have expressed dissatisfaction with the organization because of how it spends its money and the way it represents people with autism. Here are things you should consider before you donate your money or time to Autism Speak. This is the main problem. Autism Speaks does not allocate its funds to directly help people with autism. In Autism Speak's most recent budget report for the 2014 fiscal year, it spent $15.7 million of the $57.5 million total on family grants, which directly aid families and people with autism. They also spent $23 million on employee compensation, with many of their board members earning six figures. Moreover, most of Autism Speak's budget goes toward research rather than to direct care. There are other organizations that help individuals with autism that you can support. The risk factors for neurodevelopmental disorders, MMR vaccine, and childhood autism. That study would sail through to publication in NEJM on November 7, 2002. The second project, with the two thimerosal studies from Verstraeten et al. And Madsen et al., had long road still to travel. In the former study, the CDC team continued to filter and flatten the data over and over again until the numbers would tip in their favor. My son James was a typical little boy until his first birthday. I vaccinated both of my children without questioning, something I will regret the rest of my life. 2 days after his first birthday, I took him for his shots. He got the MMR vaccine. I took him home, and that's when it all changed. He started acting like he was sick, and shortly after that I watched my baby have a seizure. I took him to his doctor, freaking out. And they did tests, and when they came back normal, he asked if he was recently vaccinated. I told him yes and what he got. Both he and the health dep where he got the shots agreed it was the vaccination. Wow, Danish, she was lucky. His doctor looked at me and said it happens sometimes. That was it. After his seizure, everything changed. He stopped eating normally, stopped playing, stopped talking, stopped almost everything. My son is almost 3 now, and after a little over a year we finally got the diagnosis of autism. I wish I had done my own research, and I urge everything to do it. This pic is of my son at 8 months and now. By the time 2003 came around, pressure mounted from the parents of the growing autism community to get answers on what was happening to their children and the ballooning vaccine bubble. It was in that vein that Julie Gerberding familiarized herself with the documents that the CDC shared with Poul Thorsen and NANEA. knowing that the medicine-thimerosal study wouldn't be published for months in pediatrics, which meant deep into the new year, even with Jose Cordero's forceful letter, and that Congress circled the US vaccine program looking for answers to the autism epidemic, Julie Gerberding couldn't take the chance that the study wouldn't be published. So she looked for backup plans that included more studies to be conducted in Denmark. Our world changed forever. Hepatitis B and DTaP nearly took her life at 11 months old. She was diagnosed with ADEM and transverse myelitis secondary to a severe adverse reaction to vaccines. The CDC legitimized Poul Thorsen as a research scientist. In doing so, it fed the Dane, who was an attention grabber, a capitalist in a conservative socialist society. Thorsen's quest for money and fame, or at least name recognition, made him an outlier in Danish society. But Poul Thorsen did not care about the harm he caused to those who received the vaccines. This story was written by Avery's mom. Don't all moms vaccinate their kids? That's what they do, right? No questions asked. We just vaccinate our kids because you're supposed to, or so I thought. My son Avery was born in 2004 and was vaccinated on the CDC schedule through the age of 13 months. After every vaccine appointment, the physical and emotional changes in my child were unmistakable. He screamed for hours, blood-curdling, horrific screaming so long and so hard he would nearly pass out. After every vaccine appointment, he developed hard, bloody stool, rashes that covered his whole body, ear infections, sensory problems, refusal to nurse, refusal to sleep, refusal to just be. I was a first-time mom and had no idea this wasn't normal baby stuff. No one told me it's not normal for your baby to recoil in horror when you touch him. It's not normal for a baby to start crying the moment a stranger looks at them. At my lowest point, I contemplated killing him, or killing myself, or killing both of us. I look back upon those days with extreme shame and try to imagine myself being poisoned to the point of losing my mind, how that must feel, how he must have felt, and wondering why no one had ever told me this was a possibility. I feel extreme guilt, extreme sadness, extreme emotions over a period of my life I am least proud of. I don't want to mention the A word just yet, but were the words Avery's pediatrician used at his 18-month appointment. I stared at her, mouth open, wondering how any person could be so cruel. The A word? Really? Only once I researched it did I learn it was not normal for a toddler to scream for hours on end for seemingly no reason. It was not normal that he had never tried to speak, never wavered, never pointed, and spent the majority of his time staring at ceiling fans. Don't all kids shriek like they are being burned when you set them down in the grass? Don't all toddlers flap their arms and run on their tippy toes? At the pet's office, he was quickly diagnosed with sensory processing disorder and a speech delay. I did the typical recommended therapies with our local First Steps program. But he got progressively worse at an alarming rate. Our occupational therapist, after another 40-minute screaming session, snarled at me. What you have here is a very unhappy child. 1 month before his 3rd birthday, I took Avery in for an official autism evaluation. For 2 days he screamed and cried and trashed his way around the evaluation center. On the 2nd day, I finally had a meeting with the psychologist and could hear Avery wailing in the next room. The psychologist bustled into the room and almost gleefully proclaimed, "They're just getting him cleaned up. Don't be alarmed, all autistic kids throw up a lot." Autism, the A word. My mind went to mush. My absolute first thought was for my husband. He'll never be able to play baseball with my son. In that second, with those callous words of a stranger, his life seemed to be over, before it ever had a chance to begin. I was devastated. I'll admit it, I wanted a normal child. I wanted kids like my nieces and nephews, all perfect and uncomplicated. I cried a lot. I mostly cried in my shower so no one would hear me letting the huge mind-numbing sobs overcome me. After that, I got mad. Why Avery? Why me? Autism isn't something I signed up for. And after I was done being pissed, I got active. Fine, let's do this thing. At first, Avery attended a developmental preschool and made little progress. I left him screaming at the door and picked him back up, screaming at the same door. My days were filled with a screaming toddler who wanted nothing and everything and nothing all at the same time. The first time any journalist inside or out of Denmark spoke to him about his years working in Thorsen and NANEA at the end of June 2015, he said that Poul Thorsen had all his money from the CDC, yet he starved his research group NANEA. I was paid by Aarhus University just like other quality scientists. At NANEA, he hired mid-level managers and lots of interns. Poul Thorsen starved NANEA. He repeated during the 30-minute interview. But Thorsen's house of cards was out of sight in Denmark. At IPTERP's name and solid reputation with the Danish Research Council and the century-old Aarhus University, and he felt there was no way for the CDC or anyone else to question the validity of his research, NANEA's lofty goals, and in the end, what he did with the money or how he spent it. Senator Army stood up against the poisoning of US Army troops, yet a dozen years later didn't stand up for the little guys, as in babies, infants, toddlers, and children. Under the storm of the growing autism-Timerosol divide at the turn of the millennium, where the autism incidence rates for newborns were rising each year as if it was a compounded double-digit growth investment, Senator Richard Army wrote a rider into his Homeland Security Act of 2002 after the 475-page bill was done. For the CDC director, Julie Gerberding, the Lily Rider, as it was referred to, signaled the next phase in shutting parents out of getting compensation for their vaccine-injured babies and children. She knew, however, there would be a fight ahead in Capitol Hill in 2003. Yet, in the same breath, Gerberding saw to it that the CDC would push hard to get the Danish thimerosal study, Christens Medicines Baby, published. Knowing Boyle survived the toothless Congress, Gerberding understood that the CDC was a Teflon monolith. Nothing could dent the agency or slow it down. That gave the director impetus to take risks within the CDC, overhaul sluggish parts of the agency, and take control of messaging without the fear of being fired when on the receiving end of political retribution or negative publicity. Without being reckless or overconfident, Julie Gerberding knew 2003 was the year that the CDC would kill the thimerosal controversy with respect to vaccines, while continuing to use Poul Thorsen's Danish team of scientists that they needed to produce whatever results the agency needed to produce. For Dr. Thorsen, 2003 was a pivotal year to renew or extend the cooperative agreement with the CDC. Although she didn't want to sit at the negotiating table, she let it be known that Colleen Boyle and Diana Schendel that they needed to secure a deal, but at a fair and equitable price, according to a source within the CDC. The tech review was the next payment application for the cooperative agreement between the CDC and Poul Thorsen's NANEA. Busy at Aarhus University in Denmark, Diana Schendel replied 3 days later with a page-long email writing, "Tom, here's the technical report, plus I have attached 2 other files. The one called NANEA Budget FY04 breaks out the budget by alcohol CP autism activities, so you can see how it works out into separate piles." Schendel's files referred to research units within the NANEA research group. She went on to explain how the monies were allocated equally between the 3 units, with CP being cerebral palsy. The activities include studies of autism in relation to exposure of measles, mumps, rubella (MMR) vaccine and potential biomarkers for autism measured on newborn blood spots, taking other perinatal factors into account. The unique research sources was merely the Danish health registries, which allowed Denmark at the CDC's behest to skew, manipulate, omit, cook, massage, and flatten the data until it read just right. Dr. Diane Simpson had done her part to look for, interview, recruit, and secure Denmark as the foreign taskmaster to deconstruct any passive or causal links between autism and both MMR and thimerosal. More critical to securing the funding from the CDC was Diana Schendel's role in writing the brief overview of the technical report. It was her professional understanding of how the grant application would be reviewed and what the key ingredients were to get it approved, and not Poul Thorsen that got the job done. She discussed increasing the international travel for 2004 budget in order to pay for all the costs not expected to share with the CDC, as has happened in past years. I have had long discussion with Poul on this trip about the budget, especially moving some of the lab costs into the future. I think we will be able to get funds from the Alsace Foundation to cover some of this in on future. Diana Schendel also mentioned the weak dollar exchange rates doesn't help either. She gave her itinerary to Horn, explaining she would be available on the phone Monday, travel back to the US. Tuesday be in Washington, D.C., Wednesday and Thursday before flying back home to Atlanta on Friday.